The number one biggest challenge for any large enterprise is just going to be the different expectations, aspirations, and levels of willingness to engage across a large organization. There's really no one size fits all solution here. So you have to generate small success points, and this is really a change management process.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Chief AI Officer. Today I'm speaking with Mark Daley, who is the Chief AI Officer at Western University, a leading research-intensive university and a global community. Mark, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into some of the topics we'll talk about today. First off, you are recognized in the press as the first Chief AI Officer at a higher education institution. I think that's an amazing claim to fame and important of things to come, I'm sure. But, you've obviously been in the field long before the kind of ChatGPT moment that set the fire, as I think you mentioned in one interview. Can you share that first moment or experience for you that really sparked your interest in AI?
So I actually started my post-secondary career in Boston at Berklee College of Music as a musician, and there was a day where I found myself in the Boston Public Library, and I was getting out some advanced math textbooks. I was like, maybe I want to be a mathematician or a computer scientist. And so I pivoted and switched majors because I got so interested in computation in the abstract, not digital computers necessarily, but just the process of computation. And as soon as that happens, you get interested in the brain. It's like, oh, that's a pretty interesting computer. And then what if we could make a computer be more like the brain? So neural computation sort of is what drove me initially to pivot careers to computer science and mathematics. So I've always sort of had this fascination with what's the relationship between computation and cognition.
Wow, amazing. And that's less of a jump than I think most people will think it is, because I feel like the ability to appreciate music is something that involves an incredible amount of neural computation. So, it feels like a natural fit to move on from there. That's amazing. And what was that like? Did you immediately love the topic that you decided to pursue, and that kind of is just where your career headed after that?
It turns out that, doing math and computer science gives you the opportunity to collaborate with all sorts of interesting people doing all sorts of interesting things. And so I love that I picked a career that I'm passionate about, but also gives me the opportunity to build partnerships and to learn totally new things from people who are expert at those things, including coming back to music. Last year with my colleague, Kate Helson, we published a paper analyzing Gregorian chant using some tools from AI, which is kind of that felt really cool.
Yeah, it's nice to come full circle like that. Yeah, I think this speaks a little bit to how you think about strategy. You also in a recent interview, you said that, you don't think that you'll have an office of AI in your institution. It'll be everywhere, and you don't have a department of running water, right? I think that speaks to just the ability, how many people, departments, things that AI can bring you to. And at Western University specifically, as their inaugural Chief AI Officer, how do you describe kind of the strategic vision you have for integrating AI across the campus and the organization?
So I have 4 E's that I'm building the strategy so far around. And of course, the strategy it has to be built in consultation, in concert with the community. And I have a broad range of community, from finance professors to finance professionals to students. It's a big team endeavor, but the 4 E's are: first is education. So ensuring that every member of the Western community, whether you're a first-year undergraduate student or that finance professor we mentioned, has an opportunity to get the training they need to engage with this intelligently and ethically. The second E is empowerment. People need to feel that it's okay to use this, because when ChatGPT first came out, especially in an academic environment, lots of concerns: is this cheating? And so you have to define rules around, what is ethical use of this and where is it appropriate? And yeah, in a lot of cases, please use it and tell us what you're doing. Share that with the rest of the community. So that spirit of experimentation is the third point. No one at this moment in time can say, I mean, some people are trying to, but I don't think they have the credibility yet. This is exactly the right way to deploy generative AI. Because it is a general purpose tool, it's a general purpose technology, it's really hard to put it on rails. And in fact, you probably can't. So each individual needs to experiment because it's going to be different by role and by personal preference where you get the most benefit from these technologies. And then the fourth E, of course, is execute. We actually have to build things. And my approach there is I'm not building anything myself. I am a consultant and a partner with line managers in the organization, and they're the ones who are going to build things. And I can help them build the thing. But back to your initial point, is there going to be a chief AI officer in 5 years? I don't know. And I think AI is going to be everywhere, and it's going to be different in each place where it is. And so what I want is to skill up the existing faculty, staff, and students so that they can do this themselves.
Yeah, I like that, boiling it down to kind of a first principles framework of educate, empower, experiment, and then execute. Because unless you execute, it's all just talk. So it's great to see that you finish your framework on that as well. And it's funny you mentioned how you're thinking about that role, because I have spoken to other chief AI officers that adopt a similar kind of hub and spoke thinking almost because they are seeing this being, the people on the front lines are the people that know the use cases, know what they actually need, know what their challenges are. And ultimately, you can't have domain expertise in everything that AI is going to touch within your organization. So adopting that approach is the best way to really ensure you enable them without having to, do all of the heavy lifting from a place where you're not close enough to the problems. As you think about this at Western University, can you give some specific examples of AI applications that you're working with those people that you think will have a significant impact on the educational experience?
Absolutely. But I want to be clear, these are not my initiatives. They belong to those who are, I'm just the supporter. And what's cool about being at a university, but also presents, a non-trivial challenge, is the breadth and heterogeneity of the stakeholders who want to do things. So on the academic side, I've been talking with our Dean of Arts and Humanities and faculty in Arts and Humanities about what would it look like to have a program in AI in the humanities. And I'm really excited about that. I'm not a humanist, so I can't speak to what that looks like, but I do know a bit about AI, so I can interact. Likewise, in our faculty of music, I met with a group of colleagues who are super keen and creating a new fourth-year course in AI and music. And, I'm a music school dropout, so I know a little bit about music, but just to be in the room for that conversation is really fun. And to see uptake in places where, from the outside, you might think this is going to be, mainly science and engineering, but it's actually not. It's happening everywhere. And science and engineering are already they're already on the bandwagon. They're moving forward. On the operational business side of the university, there's so many use cases, really good conversations with colleagues in finance and internal audit about, just day-to-day use of small tools like Copilot to automate things. Sort of one of the bigger organization-wide projects that we're working on is a student-facing chatbot. And one of the things about universities is we're actually fairly decentralized usually. And so what had happened is we had about a dozen chatbots in development. And one of the real benefits to the enterprise of a role like mine is the ability to bring those stakeholders to the table and say, hey, could we possibly do this together instead of doing 12? And everyone's working in good faith for the institution, and immediately said, yeah, let's see if we can do that. And so I'm really excited to roll that out. In my previous role here, I was our CIO. And when I talked to our students about digital experience, their number one, hands down complaint is wayfinding the institution is hard. Who do I need to talk to about what? And it actually wasn't even really a digital problem. But they wanted a digital solution and an organizational chatbot that can interact with you and say, okay, Ben, what are you really trying to get at, is going to be able to provide you better wayfinding than being bounced around between humans who don't quite know what you want. So stay tuned. That will be coming this year, I hope.
And so is that solution, are you doing some sort of retrieval augmented generation on your organizational corpus and routing students to okay.
Absolutely. So, RAG is the right approach here. We are going to compare it against a couple of opportunities to do some fine tuning with a frontier level model, but I don't think fine tuning is actually necessary in this context. I think with the advances we've seen in RAG, it should be relatively doable.
Yeah, that's a great use case in terms of just tapping into your organizational knowledge. I think one thing we've seen in the education sector we work in as well is that student, like you said, sometimes the hunger for a digital experience because access to the human one is difficult. Like there's often a lot of difficulty in getting access to advisors to understand your modules and your courses and actually plan your entire degree to graduate on time. And we found that that's a space where we sit in very well to differentiate from RAG because you're actually doing constraint optimization, like helping students to plan, making sure it's in line with your course requirements as a university. But I think there's just so many use cases across an educational institution that you can tap into. As you do that, there's obviously some ethical challenges, right? We have this in business, but I think even more so in education, as you pointed out at the beginning. How do you anticipate that kind of playing out? How does Western University plan to address some of those challenges to make sure AI is used responsibly and make sure it's used ethically?
Fantastic questions. And I'm going to talk about the thing I'm most proud of first. In our Faculty of Information and Media Studies, we have several professors who work on this as their core area of scholarship. I'll call out specifically Luke Stark and Joanna Redden have published extensively on this and are super thoughtful and are actually incredibly valuable colleagues to me because I'm a computer scientist and a techno-optimist, and having critics who I really respect to say, but Mark, have you thought about, gives me immediate benefit, but they're also providing benefit to all of society by publishing this and highlighting, here are the things we need to think about to use this technology ethically, and there's probably places where we shouldn't use it. So that's sort of the first pillar. How we roll it out internally when it comes to teaching, we are, of course, strong believers in the principle of academic freedom. And so it really is up to every individual instructor. We empower and trust them to know how to integrate this technology or not into what they're teaching. So my classic example is if you're a piano performance major and you have a robot perform your final jury for you, you probably missed the point of studying piano performance. But at the same time, if you are an international student and English is not your first language, and you're taking a course in algebraic topology, and the material is already, filling your bucket with cognitive load, the ability to put that into a tool like Claude or ChatGPT and say, can you bring this into my native language for me? So now it's easier for me to reason about. And unlike Google Translate, which is sort of a one-off translation, I can continue to dialogue in a language that's more comfortable and has a lower cognitive load for me. So there, there's all of those opportunities there too to use it pro-socially, but it really is up to the individual instructor to decide, how do I want this used in my classroom? And that really depends on the learning outcomes and pedagogical goals.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's very much, again, not seeing it as this all-encompassing thing, like this is a tool. People will use this tool in various ways. Let's focus on the ways that they're using it rather than over-index on the tool itself. And so given that you're in education as well, have you seen issues around, people using, for example, the example you gave of someone translating things, like any issues with hallucination or things where, you have, someone relying on the tool because it sounds so authoritative and confident in its delivery of it, they then get into trouble down the line or they miss some of that educational experience for you?
So that's a huge part of the education piece for how to use these tools ethically. And so this is baked into our training for instructors. And we are working on training for, co-curricular training for undergraduate students. I've already done a number of town halls with our undergraduate students where we get into this. And yeah, there is an expectation that, it sounds like it knows what it's talking about. But, Sometimes second year students sound like they know what they're talking about because they want part marks on the exam, even if they don't. And so you can frame it in that sort of fun way, but helping people understand that this isn't perfect. Just like a human isn't perfect. It will make mistakes. It will sometimes confabulate. That problem is less now than it was even a year ago, and will continue probably to see improvement there. But ultimately, this comes back to the ethics and teaching responsible use and agency of AI. There's this weird thing on social media right now where people prompt generative AI to produce things that are offensive, and then point and say, look what the AI did. It's like, well, if you draw an offensive drawing with a pencil, no one points at the pencil and says, look what the pencil did. So you as the user who are prompting this thing, you've got to take accountability for what you prompt it to do. And that flows all the way through back to academic honesty and scholarly integrity.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Again, just it is the tool, right? So you have to put it in the right hands. I think where a lot of the debate will come is in educational settings in particular, I guess, where, again, that tool, if you're using it in a pedagogical setting where you're like learning from it and asking it questions where it sounds so convincing that it leads you astray. But as you said, there are improvements happening there. As things shift in this landscape, which is basically constantly and at an ever-increasing rate, how do you see the role of a chief AI officer evolving, particularly in the context of higher education?
I think the role evolves in response to my stakeholder demands. And so honestly, every month it's been a bit different because the technology is changing so quickly. And the reality is the AI we had a year ago very much felt like a tool. And it was super useful in some use cases and not useful at all in other use cases. And the AI we have now, if you look at some of the results with Claude 3 Opus, when they did the needle in a haystack test on it, and it got the answer right, and then said, but actually, I think you're testing me, which kind of feels like metacognition. And so now we have models that not only do something that feels like cognition, it feels like they're doing metacognition, and they're more and more and more capable. And the number one question I'm getting from students right now isn't, how do I do an AI startup? How do I get money from Sam Altman? How do I build the infrastructure? I get some of those questions from computer science students, but the number one question I get is, what would happen if the computer gets better at every cognitive task humans do? What then? What does that mean for me? And fortunately, I can say, well, you're in a university that has a faculty of arts and humanities, and it turns out humanists have been thinking about this for millennia. And there are courses you can take that will answer the question, what does it mean to live a good life? And the answer isn't, I'm the best person at adding 3-digit numbers in my county. And the answer doesn't have to be related to a skill. You can actually turn this around and say, okay, if I'm willing to give up a little bit of anthropocentrism, what I actually have now is a tool that empowers me to have more agency than any human that's ever lived before me has. And students like that, right? Our students here, they want to solve wealth inequality. They want to solve climate change. And so instead of feeling threatened by a machine that it can add numbers better than you, and it can write poetry better than you now too, which is a surprise, but here we are. You can leverage that for the things that you want to achieve and have an outsized impact compared to what a person your age had even 5 years ago.
Yeah, I love that reframing for students in particular of shifting the art of what's possible and thinking about what do you actually care about and not necessarily rote learning. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the Claude example because it also, to me, is an indication potentially not of metacognition, but of an LLM just being very good at training on the data, and it trained on data where people were testing the system in particular ways. And so I think there's still a big debate in the industry right now of is it really our LLMs alone the way to get there? But I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff happening with hybrid systems, neurosymbolic AI. As you said, it's such a constantly changing landscape. And it sounds like your students in particular are asking the right questions, the deeper questions too about, what does this mean for my place in society and how I can be productive?
I was just going to say LLMs are probably not going to get us all the way. There will be new architectures, and that's the history of AI. We come up with better, more efficient architectures, and there's already lots of ways you can imagine extending an LLM, doing things like Monte Carlo tree search on top of the sampling stage of the LLM, and now you're combining two pretty powerful but very distinct routes towards AI. You mentioned neurosymbolic, lots of exciting things to come. But even just LLMs by themselves, what's interesting about them is you've got this trivially true statement that, oh, they're just next token predictors. Right, that's how we train them. But if you're predicting the next token in a proof of Gödel's theorem, you actually need to understand Gödel's theorem, or you will not have a good probability distribution for what the next token is going to be. And so there is actually a good amount of literature now underlying Ilya Sutskever's rejection of that interpretation, saying, sure, but to predict the next token, you got to build a world model. And it looks like LLMs do have, and diffusion networks too. We saw that with Sora. Jim Fan has some great stuff on Twitter about how, hey, it actually looks like this is a whole world simulator in 80 billion floating points numbers, which, whoa, that's kind of crazy. But LLMs are building world models of a sort. They're approximations, and I do think they do something that looks like cognition. It's not human cognition, of course, because their architecture is very different, but phenotypically, it sure feels like cognition.
Yeah, I mean, the experience, that's a part of the whole thing, right? That's, I think, why, as you put it, ChatGPT set the world on fire, whenever it was not, it feels like long ago, but which really wasn't that long ago. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to watch all the research come out. I think another paper came out last week or the week before on, the diminishing returns of LLMs and like how much data are we going to need, and you have Sam Altman asking for $7 trillion. It's going to be a space that is going to force us to ask some very deep questions, like your students are asking themselves around what do we really want from a relationship with this technology as well, which I think, to me, as a lifelong sci-fi nerd and watching how novelists have thought about this, is some of the most interesting questions to ask.
So I love this. And this is something I tell our students is like, if this is really keeping you up at night, take a science fiction literature course. It turns out literature isn't just for entertainment. It's not just fun. It's really smart people with a voice that they want to get out doing a strategic foresight exercise, right? Like here, Asimov presents, here is a scenario for something that might be possible. I'm not saying this is going to happen for sure, but you're like, here's an interesting scenario. And so you can engage in depth with these worlds. And what's kind of cool about being alive in the LLM era is the frontier model LLMs are actually pretty good at pulling personae out of fiction, where it's been trained on the fiction, and now you can have a conversation with a robot from Asimov's world. And I do a lot of K-12 outreach and have conversations with teachers who are in the classroom, and some of the more forward-looking ones are doing exactly that. And it totally changes the relationship with literature from, here's this novel I have to read for my class to that now it's this interactive thing. And the whole point of literature is to communicate ideas. It's not just, this is a cool story.
Yeah, I mean, that it is some of the more interesting, creative ways that we get people, like you said, to engage more with the content, to engage more, with the subject matter. There's so many ways to do that. It's nice to see very positive things coming out of that. You've obviously been deeply involved in AI from theory to practice now at Western University. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you're encountering about AI, and how are you addressing them in Western University?
The initial misconception wasn't even a misconception. It was just sort of a visceral fear reaction, which is normal. We're primates. We evolved. If there's something radically new in the environment, all of a sudden we should be skeptical because it could be a predator. And if you're not skeptical, you don't live to pass your genes on. So the default response to ChatGPT for those who were outside the AI community and didn't know much about LLMs was, oh, I need to be very, very skeptical of this. We're well past that now. That skepticism has dissolved. But we are now in a world where there is a huge variety of all completely valid beliefs and opinions about this technology. You have the extreme accelerationists who think it's probably already almost conscious, whatever conscious means, and we should just make the final push and build an artificial general intelligence, whatever that means, all the way through to sort of the what looks like the polar opposite, but actually sort of believes that the same thing is possible, and saying maybe we shouldn't create sentient organisms that might suffer until we're really sure what we're doing. And then in the middle, you have an approach where, oh, this is a tool, like a desk calculator, but a really fancy one, and it can help me do my job better. And in fact, it's really good at the parts of my job that I hate. So I can't wait to outsource Outlook, Copilot, answer all my email for me. And so that diversity of opinions is exactly what I want on a university campus. And I want to empower all of those voices. And I think the most important thing we can do as a society is have that dialogue. And we're seeing it happen. The European AI Act here in Canada, we have Bill C-27. Governments are starting to react and consulting with the public. And it's really important that is a broad consultation with as many different voices from diverse constituencies as possible. The actual last people who should be weighing in are technologists like me.
Yeah, I hope we don't go down the route that we so frequently do in policy, which is to go straight to the industry experts without consulting the people on the ground that are interfacing with the technology. And this, like as you said, this is such a huge question facing humanity that would be a shame to do and a big loss for us all. From your perspective, as you think about this in higher education, what are some of the most promising aspects of generative AI, and what are pitfalls that other universities and other organizations should be paying attention to?
So the most promising aspect is accessibility to knowledge and to education. So we live in a world where over 54% of humans alive have access to a smartphone. So we actually have the technological infrastructure. If we chose to make the policy decision to create sovereign frontier level AI, where a country could say, okay, every citizen in our country is going to have access to Canada AI. And we're going to treat that as like a fundamental human right under the rubric of education. And that's different than just giving everyone access to Wikipedia, because like that's great. Wikipedia is amazing. But if I go to the algebraic number theory page on Wikipedia and I'm not already an algebra, I'm just going like, okay, I'm not doing that. Whereas we have technology now that you can say, okay, that scared me. Can you explain it like I'm 5, and then we'll build up, and it can do that. So AI as an always on everywhere tutor really fundamentally changes the model of education, but maybe not in a radically new direction, but maybe in a way where we sort of come back full circle. If you look at Plato's writing on Socrates, Socrates was pretty convinced that the best way to teach was dialogue. And in a big state university like mine, we just can't give every undergraduate student a professor. There's not enough profs to go around, but we can give every undergraduate student access to a conversational AI that knows a lot about everything, including their course material, and is not judgy and is always available. You want to work on your circuits homework at 3:00 in the morning, it's not going to complain. And so it actually allows us to deliver education in a very old-fashioned, high-quality, precision way by leveraging modern technology. And I am just so excited about that.
Yeah, I think that is truly one of its revolutionary potential. And as you said, not so revolutionary in the historical scheme of things. And, I know it's a stereotype, but I think around the world, a lot of people would be more than happy for Canada to be the first one to make Canada AI, because you're always such a friendly people and you do things the right way. So I would be behind Canada AI. And it's funny you mentioned access too, because, at Elemental Cognition, we're building neurosymbolic AI applications for enterprises. And we feel like there are a lot of formal systems, computational systems that are incredibly good and efficient at what they do. And so trying to use LLMs for those is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But LLMs are incredible at translation and natural language processing and unlocking access to these formal systems, which are very, very hard to build. And so it's funny, you mentioned that in the educational aspect, but I think the same thing will play out in industry as people really start to get serious about their use cases beyond just copywriting and content generation. Like a hybrid system where you use LLMs for increasing access, I think is where there's going to be so much value that gets unlocked in the long term.
Totally agree.
I mean, from your perspective as a leader, what are some of the biggest, challenges that organizations face today in realizing the benefits of AI?
So the number one biggest challenge for any large enterprise is just going to be the different expectations, aspirations, and levels of willingness to engage across a large organization. There's really no one size fits all solution here. So you have to generate small success points. And this is really a change management process. This is like classic textbook change management. Get your champions, get your bright spots, get people to convince their peers, like Susan spends half as much time on email as she used to, and she seems a lot happier. Maybe I want some of that too. So there's the heterogeneity. There's the obvious pieces that haven't changed, but people may not pull them from the digital world into AI, which are around, private information, whether that's business confidential, PII. What cloud are you putting your business secrets into? Do you have a data sharing agreement with that vendor? And that can all be negotiated, and you can have that. But sometimes people are so enthusiastic to play that they put things they shouldn't into a chatbot where, they just have a subscription that says, not only will we not protect your data, we promise we'll train on your data. You are part of our product. So, that you're just reiterating those data hygiene messages and data security messages. And then when you have a general purpose technology like this, in a 3-person startup, you can govern it just by talking about it. In a community of 60,000, we can't govern anything just by talking about it. We have to have formal mechanisms and procedures, and university governance moves slowly by design because we want to be really thoughtful and careful. And so how do you create a governance framework that, encourages and incentivizes people to do the right thing, to do the ethical thing, meets that heterogeneity of expectations and use cases, and is agile enough to adapt to a world where, things that we think, I don't have to worry about that yet, 4 months from now, when GPT-5 with agents comes out, well, now I do have to worry about that.
I think it's finding those thoughtful structures while maintaining agility is something that governments, organizations, honestly, even humans, even individuals are going to have to figure out how to deal with. So it's an interesting time. I mean, looking ahead a little bit, I know everyone hates to make predictions, especially in these kinds of fields, but how do you imagine the impact of AI evolving in educational and research contexts?
Again, I think the right way to do this is using strategic foresight tools. So scenario planning. If you're asking me, there's 5 or 6 possible scenarios, and one of them is a world where, it turns out today is the moment that progress in LLMs dies. We've reached the scaling law, and it doesn't keep improving anymore. And so even with that, there's a lot we can do, even if AI never gets materially better. But I actually don't give that scenario a lot of credence. I think even just with what we've got right now, Jensen Huang selling us another 2, 3, 400,000 B100s, B200s is going to get us improvement. And so it is likely we will inhabit a future where these things become more and more capable. And the things that we felt made us unique as humans, at least cognitively, that sphere of anthropocentrism is just going to shrink to a point where, okay, like it's no longer rational to be anthropocentric. I just have to accept machines are really good at these things. And so what does that mean? Here in the academy, it means we have whole different ways of thinking about the affordances we offer in education and about education. The tutor is one of them we talked about, but also in the research mission of the university. Imagine you had a research assistant that has a human equivalent IQ of 500. And what happens when it helps you come up with this great new quantum computing algorithm. And then it says, but, Mark, I think I should be first author because it was really my idea. And like people laugh when I say that, but, it's possible that we inhabit in the near term a future where that's actually kind of true. I'm outsourcing more and more of my thinking to a machine because in some ways it's smarter than me. It's never going to replicate a human, but it'll be different. And in some ways it'll be better. And so what does that look like? And where we actually end, if you pull that thread long enough, this is true for research, for teaching, and actually for all of society, we will be making judgments of what we outsource to AI and what we keep for ourselves. So right now, even Microsoft Copilot can draft a good enough email. And so I can outsource the writing of an email. And if it's a stock bureaucratic form, I really don't feel that bad outsourcing it. But if I'm replying to an email from my partner, if I outsource that, there's like a value judgment and ethical decision that got made there that I feel really bad about and wouldn't do. And so we actually have to start training people to think intelligently, like, yes, you can outsource that task. The machine can do that thing, but do you want to? Piano performance major, do you want the robot to perform for you, or was the whole point for you to perform? And that isn't actually a technology problem. That's a values and ethics problem. It's a humanities problem.
That's a great response and something that I think everyone will be thinking about more and more deeply as the years go on. How do we build the right relationship with technology, the people around us, ourselves, as we navigate the potential opportunity, but also what it costs us to give up some of that agency? I think they're very, very interesting questions that lie ahead of us. Mark, I could talk to you all day, to be honest, but we're almost at time. So let's wrap up for the day. Before we do that, if people want to follow you and your work, where's the best place for them to go?
You can follow what Western's doing in AI at ai.uwo.ca, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, you heard him. That's Mark Daley from Western University. Go find him on LinkedIn. Let him know what you thought about the episode once you get a chance to hear it. For everyone else, I think have a great day, Mark. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for coming on the show.
Me too. Thanks so much for a great chat.